During the week, I decided to take a risk. Now, those of you that know my brother, he's a Baptist minister, but we won't hold that against him. He's got a tattoo on the back of his head. And I decided that I would get a tattoo during the week. Now, I might lose some friends over this, but however, I went to this guy in Ocean Grove who's an ex-bikie, and he told me that he's done some terrible things in his life, which I suppose we could all imagine. However, when I told him that I was a minister of religion, it took him a while to pick himself up from the floor. And we had a terrific talk about God and the world and religion and all of those sorts of things. So that's my risk. The statement says, everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind always. During the time I was chaplain at Wesley College, they introduced the primary years International Baccalaureate program. There's a list of learner profile attributes that students strive to achieve during the primary years program. And among those attributes, skills such as being open-minded, being good communicators, caring for others, and being a risk taker. And we all know that we do not grow as a person unless we take risks. Our world, of course, is full of potential risks. Just getting out of bed each day can present us with a number of risks. The risk of getting food poisoning from the fast food shop, the risk of natural tragedy depending on where you are. Many people have experienced that risk in the ongoing bushfires, of course. And the risk of a car accident, the risk of sickness, the risk of being misunderstood or misunderstanding others, the risk of just getting by and not living intentionally, the risk of not making a difference to other people's lives. We think about taking a risk, and then our monkey brain kicks in. Fight or flight is our response. Risk language, of course, is often used in the business and educational areas of life, just to name a couple. When people are about to set up a new business, they look at the financial risks that are involved in the startup costs, the competition, and how to get people to your site, the unique product or service that your business will offer, anticipated monthly and yearly expenses versus anticipated revenue, and the list, of course, goes on. I know in the educational arena, just to take students in an off-campus excursion, you had to do a risk assessment on the potential safety and things that could go wrong on such an excursion. And when at Wesley I worked up in the Kimberleys at Wesley's studio school with the Bunnaba people in Western Australia, taking 25 students off campus in 5 or 6 Toyota Troopies meant that you were required to fill out about 2 pages of risk assessment as we were driving on dirt and gravel roads and through many waterways. And in your personal life, you might consider the risks involved in how you plan out your financial future as you approach retirement age, what to invest in or not invest, how to budget your money, or just you're going to live from week to week. And when it comes to our health, all of us face a variety of potential risks every single day, from our diet to exercise to how we deal with stress and worry and other conflict management issues in our lives. And of course, when we consider human relationships, well, I won't go down that track. We all know the risks that are associated with making friends, choosing a partner. I'll let you fill out the blanks with that one. Oceanographers, of course, inform us that a lobster grows by shedding its shell at regular intervals. The body of the lobster begins to feel cramped inside its present shell. So the lobster tries to find a reasonably safe spot, usually on the floor of the ocean, in which to rest while its hard shell comes off. And a new pink membrane just inside the hard shell becomes the next shell, which will be big enough for the lobster to live in. But there's a risk involved. No matter where a lobster goes for this shedding process, it is always in danger and very vulnerable. It can get tossed against a hard and rough coral surface or eaten by other fish. But in order to grow, the lobster has to risk its life. The revolutionary idea that defines the boundary between the times in which we live and the past is, of course, the mastery of risk. That the future is more than a whim of the gods, and that men and women are not passive before nature. Until human beings discovered a way across that boundary, the future was always a mirror of the past, or the murky domain of oracles and soothsayers who held a monopoly over the interpretation of future events. The ability to define what may happen in the future and to choose among alternatives lies at the very heart of modern societies. Risk management guides us over a vast range of human decision-making, from allocating wealth to safeguarding public health, from waging war to planning a family, from paying insurance premiums to wearing a seatbelt, from planting corn to marketing cornflakes. Without an understanding of probability theory, then, and other instruments of risk management, engineers could never have designed and built great bridges, homes would still be heated by small wooden heaters, electric power utilities and gas would not exist, polio would still be maiming our children, no aeroplanes would fly, and space travel would be but a dream. As Peter Bernstein says in his book, Risk Against the Gods, the modern conception of risk is rooted in the Hindu-Arabic numbering system that reached the West 700 to 800 years ago. But the serious study of risk began during the Renaissance, when people were able to break free from the constraints of the past and long-held established beliefs to open challenge. All of us have heard the phrase, "Don't put all your eggs in one basket." In 1952, Nobel laureate Harry Markowitz, a research student at the University of Chicago, demonstrated mathematically why putting all your eggs into one basket is an unacceptably risky strategy, and why diversification is the nearest an investor or financial advisor can ever come to a free lunch. The effects of that revolutionary idea are still felt today. We all have to make decisions on the basis of limited data. One sniff or sip of a bottle of wine determines whether the whole bottle is drinkable or not, or you pour it down the sink. A courtship with a future spouse or partner is always shorter than the lifetime that lies ahead of that couple. Public opinion pollsters interviewed 2,000 people to ascertain a nation's state of mind. And the Dow Jones Industrial Average consists of just 30 stocks, but we use it as a measure of the changes in trillions of dollars of wealth owned by millions of families and thousands of major financial institutions around the world. Sampling is always essential to risk-taking. And the science of risk management sometimes creates new risks, even as it brings old risks under control. Our faith in risk management encourages us to take risks we would not otherwise take. Research reveals that seatbelts encourage drivers to drive more aggressively, and consequently the number of accidents goes up, although the seriousness of the injuries decreases. When Isaac Newton began to explain the relationship between cause and effect, the bulk of the traditional way of understanding the Jesus story becomes untenable. Newton shut the doors to those phenomena usually attributed to divine intervention. He shrank the places in which magic and miracle were said to have occurred in the past, and he made all the supernatural narratives in which the theistic God invaded the world less and less believable. That process, of course, still continues today, pushing the limits of the horizon, as we talked about last week. So the word risk, then, is derived from the early Italian riscare, which means to dare. And in this sense, risk is a choice rather than a fate. The actions we dare to take, which depend on how free we are to make choices, are what the story of risk is all about. Our reading from Matthew's Gospel has left its mark on our language and culture. We all know that the parables of Jesus were told and retold, and they were modified by individual storytellers. This parable of the money in trust is an example of a parable that has been heavily edited by both Matthew and Luke, who recorded it. It is only Matthew, of course, who speaks of talents. So someone going on a trip entrusts his money to his slaves. The three slaves handle the money in different ways, and then the master returns to settle the accounts. And the money of the slave who hid his capital in the ground is taken away, and the money is given to the slave who produced the greatest profit. And when the master gives the money to the slaves, he doesn't call in a motivational guru. He trusted them to do what they were instructed to do. So the parable indulges in exaggeration. The sums of money given to the slaves are incredible. According to the Jesus Seminar, 30,000 and 12,000 silver coins each amount to a fortune. And even the 6,000 silver coins given to the third slave comes to about 20 years' wages for the common labourer. The end of the parable then seems to be unfair, since hiding the money to protect it from theft was in keeping with rabbinical law, and it was a safe thing to do. The problem, even though it was a safe form of investment, was that there was no potential for growth. The parable treats it as a bad thing, contrary to his listeners' expectations. So as a modern society, we seem to be so busy today sanitising our life through political correctness and warning labels on everything that for many people it is now learned behaviour to avoid risks rather than to embrace them. We're all familiar with the negative aspects of taking risks, but there are also positive benefits as well. Taking risks reduces the hold that fear has over us. The greatest enemy of risk is fear or resistance. We saw that in the third slave. Taking risks opens up new possibilities for us. For when we are risk adverse, we are immobile and stagnant. We attempt in vain to imagine possible outcomes, but it is not until we set certain creation in motion with risk that opportunities and possibilities avail themselves to us. Again, think of the first two slaves. And taking risks develops self-confidence and resilience. Taking a risk does not necessarily mean success. Taking risks boosts our self-confidence in our abilities and hones our strengths, as well as developing our resilience. And taking risks teaches great life lessons. We can listen to the advice of other people or observe how they live their lives, but it is only when we create our own life experience and learn our own lessons that we really know We can all have life knowledge, but it is life lessons that we remember. And taking risks leads to rewards. We all know people who seem to be so lucky and great things just seem to happen for them. If you want to achieve any dream, regardless of how big or small it is, you always have to take a risk. And the first risk, of course, is to overcome our resistance that is holding us back. For sometimes we might say, I took a risk and failed. Where was the reward in that? But we could reframe it and say the reward was overcoming our fear and learning new lessons of life. So the question is for all of us today, are we living our lives or are we slowly dying because we are too afraid to take a risk? It is my wish for the congregation of St. Michael's that you together will embrace risk. Will you risk the public expression of the gospel from this place, or will you keep it safely tucked away in a secure context? Because all of us are called to invest what we have been given to the broader and greater world in need. Our blessing. Divine Spirit, you're never confined just to this holy place. So go and travel with this Spirit who is found in surprising places. Go and take up the adventure of faith in praise of the eternal presence, and may the holy mystery of the one we sometimes call God be found beside the road, and the wonder of the costly love of Jesus embrace you and keep you always. Amen.